All right, we are connected for the Thursday edition of the News Update. And as always, looking forward to connecting and sharing my 2 cents on a variety of subject matter. And the question of the day is silver beginning to, I guess, rebalance or to close the gap between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere? Because we're briefly below that $10 figure. And I thought, like, what better way to kick this off by just listing some possible scenarios as to what could happen if we get more of a realistic spot price that Shanghai is kind of much, they for the most part set the pace as to where it's heading. And so I was looking at the charts this morning and it looks like we are approaching 96 with the possibility of some early morning slam downs. But then again, because we're trending towards 100, once we break 100, that right there puts us closer to the Shanghai exchange. And so, what will the world look like at that point? We're going to talk about that a lot more. But for those who are plugged in, appreciate you for blessing me with your presence. And as always, looking forward to hearing what your thoughts are. So feel free to throw some thoughts, ideas, suggestions out in the comment section. And I will do my best to try to get to them as we plug along here. Let me make sure I'm flowing on all cylinders, and then we'll get into it because I have lots of stories to filter through to kind of give a better understanding to all the noise out here. And so we got elevated or sticky inflation as always. We have Greenland. We had the board of peace and the like. It's just never ending, man. But it's going to be a good morning. So welcome, my good people. Welcome, my good people. It's going to be good here. And also, man, for my people in the Midwest and the East Coast, we're expecting a major historical type freezing, which, is winter. But then again, like the way that it's being painted as if it's going to be something for the record books, that's a little bit concerning. So definitely changed my plans as a result of all that. But just check in. So as of right now, in the good old Metro Detroit, it's 24 degrees with the possibility of getting down to looks like -3 or feel like -3. And so apparently Saturday, Sunday is going to be extremely cold. So we'll see what that looks like. But let me know what the temperature's like in your neck of the woods. It's always good to see people who live in warm and sunny climates. Let me know if you guys can hear me. Let me know if everything is coming in good, and we're going to jump right into it because I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Just because I was looking at the charts and I was noticing that we have, the COMEX or the COMEX, as I like to refer to them as. Are they giving up, or is it just premature on my part to think that there won't be some type of major drawdown today, like there always is, especially yesterday I was watching. But then again, today, something feels different. And I think it has a lot to do with the narratives surrounding the current state of our financial situation, on top of, Donald Trump's retraction of his tough talk with tariffs on Europe due to the $8 trillion worth of U.S. assets that they can just simply begin to unwind, and his threats on that. If you do that, it's going to be ugly. So, yeah, with all this noise and all these distractions and diversion tactics, it's just something about looking at silver and gold when the prices are in the positive and the charts are green. It's just like, let them talk that tough talk. It don't matter because we all know where this is heading. Anyway, okay, let's just jump into it. So let me stop ranting. I'm going to just lay out my points and go from there. But what triggered this particular angle that I wanted to touch on today has everything to do with what you see right here. And so look at this. It's Thursday. COMEX is open, and typically, and so I've been charting this for some time. Typically, when the COMEX opens, heading into 10 in the morning, we're usually trending down. But to see that from the LBMA, they continued on, no major slam downs in the European region, to us opening here in the East or the West, I'm sorry, and to see a surge. So as soon as the COMEX opened, it surged. And I'm referring more so to silver because, once we crossed that $100 mark and set that official all-time high or doubling of the previous all-time highs, not adjusted for inflation, of course, but we're going to also cross that 5,000 mark for gold, and we're off to the races because, once again, we have reached a new tier of historical precedents that has never been set before, all in the midst of the upcoming contagion when it comes to U.S. sovereign debt and everything of the like. And so it's going to be interesting. But when I saw this, I'm like, man, like, okay, at what point will the Western Hemisphere ease off the manipulations, have all the bullion banks, for the most part, cleared out a lot of their bad shorts and or taking some losses? We'll find out. But I was also seeing some commentary saying that, majority of the bullion banks that are in the short position with their, silver contracts happen to be the European banks. And so I got a lot of things I want to try to put together. May not really be plausible, but then again, in this current world of who knows what's real, what's not, it's just it wouldn't hurt to go outside the box of reality and just play out some scenarios. So what triggered this was, as of right now, here we are. Let me just refresh this because like always, something could have changed. And so as of right now, silver started to turn over a little bit. But then again, just look at that early morning surge, which I consider to be abnormal because usually, as I mentioned, we don't usually get that early mornings. And so let me just zoom in here and let's look at it the last hour and see what we can see here. And then we'll, continue to make our rounds. And so this is silver on the screen here in USD terms. Let me shrink myself some, get myself out the way here. And so literally what we're looking at is opening in the West and then the rebalancing. And of course, there's some slight correction there. Nothing major, nothing typical from what we've usually witnessed, which is usually like $1, $2, maybe $3. But, a couple cents here is nothing to really be alarmed about. But what I find the most interesting is that we are below the $10. So let me just give you so here we are, Shanghai Exchange closed, the benchmark price for silver closed at 104. And so with the US now at this current moment, price being at 95.48. So that's less than that $10. And so for the last several weeks that I've been watching this, we've been at approximately $10, $11, maybe 12 on some good days, 13 at the very max, as far as the difference between the SGE and the LBMA or the COMEX. And so now that we're beneath that 10, I was like, okay, perhaps things are starting to settle off. The West is, for the most part, backing down, and because all the major players, as far as bullion banks in the West Hemisphere, they've already positioned themselves. JP Morgan's extremely long and everything, and got the largest hoard that we know of. So perhaps they're ready to let this thing rip, head into the spring. And so right now it's kind of early, but then again, when this gap closes, the gap I'm referring to is the SGE, which has been the trendsetter for silver and gold, and the LBMA and the COMEX. That gap lessens, will probably be at some form of a equilibrium at the future pathway of discovering what silver is actually worth in the spot price, not the physical. Physical still is a different thing because physical is what you pay when you check out, when you go to buy some. But in the meantime, once we get that East and Western Hemisphere around the same spot price figure, I think it's going to take off for real, just because it'll be less of a narrative, less of an argument, less of, the tit for tat, East versus West narrative. It'll be like, okay, they're all in a position where they're ready to let it rip. And then we're going to get to the point where now it's a matter of who has the silver, who actually has the silver, and who's actually meeting their contractual obligations to deliver silver, because the SGE and the Shanghai Futures Exchange is already deliverable in physical. That's all they do. So they're clamoring to get as much physical on their end. And then we have on the Western Hemisphere, the LBMA and the COMEX have always dealt with paper. And so, of course, they've already done all the margin hikings and stuff like that to weed out a lot of the riffraff and the small players that's just been going along for the ride. And then we're going to get into how do we begin sourcing all this extra silver that is not readily available. And so, of course, the miners will respond. The refineries, I'm hearing several places, they're already shutting down some, and some are rejecting 90% quote unquote junk silver. And so many narratives out here. But at the end of the day, once the retail picks up as to what's really happening, because most of this is driven by, I would say, a smaller part of the population that actually pays attention to alternative media. So this is more so, I believe, a more alternative media driven frenzy where it's just the people that suspected a lot of things were off based upon the figures that's being given to us from the economy. So I'm going to go through a couple headlines here. And once again, the average person is not paying attention to this because everyone's focused on their stock market, stock portfolios, and things of that nature. And so once we get a more balanced narrative from the mainstream as well, which will eventually catch on because they'll be allowed to do that, then we're going to see silver and gold take off. And what concerns me is how does that affect the conventional mainstream narratives? And so that's why I'm like, okay, if I know everything is centered around digital, meaning if you listen to Davos, you listen to some of the big players, the primary two players, in my opinion, which I'm going to do another video on that, is Larry Fink and David Sachs. And so if you listen to their words out of their mouth, they've already accomplished what they were aiming to do. Now it's a matter of clarity. And I believe that clarity is coming, which will offset a lot of the euphoria if we see gold and silver continue to spike and just hit prices that we couldn't have imagined, because the opposing narrative or the counter narrative by those two individuals that are orchestrating and overseeing the reset in their digital capacities, they got something planned. And I believe it's going to hit before summertime, and I'll talk about that more in the future. But anyway, just getting all that out, just because laying some groundwork. Because once and if it plays out the way that I'm trying to articulate it, then you'll be able to say, okay, that guy with the gray beard, he was hitting on that well before. And so that's kind of like how I do my do. Okay, so let's just get into some headlines real quick, and then we'll jump around and I'll try to connect the dots. So here we got U.S. inflation rate is still stuck near 3%. Fed appears no hurry to cut interest rates again. So once again, that sticky PCE inflation metric that they use, of course, fraudulent, but we'll run with it. But it really impacts the current narrative of everything is hunky dory, everything is fine, as Jerome Powell is heading out the door, along with all the other FOMC board members that might be in line with his way of conducting, I guess, open market activity, as well as the interest rates issue. And so 3%, literally what that says is all the metrics that they've been giving us has been fake, fraudulent, faulty, because they would love to say, oh, 2.6, 2.7, it's time to come down, it's time to cut. No. When you see 3, that means it's still sticking around. It's not going anywhere. So you really don't have any justifiable reason to cut when the PCE is still above their ideal target range. And then you have the labor market, which right now, it's hard to hide that with all those revisions. So the idea of cutting is going to be a problem. Therefore, more pressure on this administration. And I think this is a part of the reason why Donald Trump has backtracked on his tough talk with tariffs in Europe. And why do I say that? Let me just give you this piece here. Trump's Greenland play puts Europe's 8 trillion U.S. bonds and equities in the spotlight. And so when you have a European region that is heavily supportive of our previous and current debt binge and our Magnificent Seven, for the most part, that's what everybody's invested in. And if they mention the idea that with this whole Greenland talk, if you continue to talk tough and you try to impose tariffs on us, we're going to have to reconsider and rethink some things in reference to what we're holding. Because by holding 8 trillion in assets, quote unquote, liabilities, you're supporting the very person rather, that's causing problems within your own jurisdiction. So just like the 2 pension funds that I've referenced before have been divesting out of U.S. liabilities, as I call them, Trump doesn't want the entire European region to be forced to do the same, because that wouldn't help the narrative that, right now the economy is great and everything is fine. And this is a part of the reason why. It says President Trump warns of major retaliation if Europe sells U.S. securities. And so it's going to be mighty hard for this administration to continue to do what it's doing as far as this extremely harsh posture that it's America first now and everybody else last. Deal with it or else. That puts us at great risk. And because of all that, that's why I'm anticipating a continual move to safety. And of course, safety being reflected in the prices of gold and silver. And so let me just get back to this page here because as I refresh the page, we are on the pathway to an equilibrium with the SGE at this current moment when it comes to silver. And so that short-lived 30 cent or not even 30 cent, 5 cent turnover that I referenced a moment ago is vanished. And now we're back off to the race towards $96. And so that further decreases the gap between the SGE and the COMEX. So by the end of this week, given all the narratives, given all the issues we're facing, we could literally be closer to that. We'll be above $100 in the Western price mechanisms, and then we'll be closing a gap with SGE unless the Shanghai Gold Exchange silver benchmark price takes off due to some type of change or narrative or whatnot. So these are things we're paying attention to because once again, this impacts your pockets because all it does is put U.S. liabilities in greater risk because the increase in gold and silver moving forward literally indicates that in order for those to trend upward, somebody else is selling something else, which happens to be our debt, which is not good because, mind you, we still have an unprecedented amount of debt coming due this year before this summer. And where are the funds going to come from to right those wrongs? And that's why it's inevitable with that before Jerome Powell exits, it'll be hard for him. He's going to try to hold off and not cut rates and not outright ease monetary policy on his way out because he would like to be the one who, when his career is done as the Fed chair, be able to write a book and say something like, I led the charge back to the greatest economic recovery post-pandemic era, something like that. He'll get some type of memoir, some type of book showing that he's a hero and saved it because he didn't bow down to the president that wanted him to cut and go to one or NERP or something. But then again, whoever comes in gonna cut right away because that's just the whole point in replacing the Fed chair for the most part is to begin cutting. And in cutting, that makes the U.S. debt burden come summertime a lot easier, or not a lot easier, but a lot more manageable to service because the newly created debt will be at a cheaper rate. And think about this: with all this tough talk, with all this, Greenland capturing and all this stuff that's going on now, everything is centered around debt and how much would another nation be willing to expose himself to risk at the sake of a president who is so off the cuff and so out there that you never know what you're going to get with him. And it's just the uncertainties of this administration that the world has to reconsider. And so you don't want to put yourself at risk to where the very same assets you call reserves, i.e. U.S. bonds and treasuries, are going to be weaponized against you by continual monetary easing, which is coming, and or you get out of line, they freeze your reserves and or confiscate it, i.e. Russia. So yeah, like holding U.S. liabilities, man, outside of spending them, which is what they're good for now because they're legal tender in our country and we have to use them to pay bills and everything, taxes, everything else. It's like the idea of wanting to go out and secure a large amount of those things for the sake of sitting on them. I look at it like, the European pension funds. At some point, you got to divest out of them things because they're going to end up causing more harm than good because what else can our government do other than cut, borrow, and spend? So, yeah. So let me get into some other things here. I got lots of headlines here. And let me give it to you straight. I got more here. Let me grab this here. I have been following. Let me get my stuff together here. I have been following. Where'd it go? Lots of narratives from different angles, and it's no way a person cannot comment on the intermingling of geopolitics with the continual push for peace. And peace, the way that this administration is trying to paint it as, is like every nation will come in agreement upon some agenda and we'll live happily ever after and there'll never be any issues. But yet you can't have peace without addressing the core problems, which happens to be different ideologies as well as agendas within the same system that has corrupted and captured all these entities. So for me, I don't trust government as far as I know a politician. I don't know any of them. So therefore I can't really vouch for them. I would like to think that they are operating in the best interest of the people that voted them in there, but I know that's not the case because special interest groups, non-government elected official, whatever. And then you have the working, the banking structure for the most part supports government's issues with the just all the operations that makes the monetary piping of our monetary system so confusing. And so here we have a president that's hard pressed on peace. He ran on this current year. His New Year's wish was world peace. And I think all this world peace narrative is centered around a certain nation, and it's not even his idea. He just want to take the credit for it because he's in a position of power to be able to say, this is what will, I guess, make the world better or whatever, world peace. We know there could be no world peace because you never address the core problems. And for a president who hasn't really lived up to his promises to his voters, it's hard to believe that he's going to actually accomplish this world peace narrative by having nation states, I guess, give $1 billion to join a board. And what's the objective of having a board when you still have difference in opinions on a lot of subjects, and in particular, the religious activity? And so I believe this whole board of peace, and the reason I'm getting to this is because we've had the signing of the Board of Peace Charter, officially making the Board of Peace an international organization. And so he's labeled as the peace president, but to accomplish what is not quite clear. And so clearly there's more to this story, but this is very important because this is the geopolitical side of things, and it's been rebranded and using the words peace. And it's bringing together these nations, and majority of them, their ideas and their philosophies doesn't mesh well with Western values. And so to me, I'm saying all this because I believe this is more of a diversion / addition to the Abrahamic Accords, which Donald Trump started his first term and attempted at the beginning of this year to continue it on, but it's all predicated on Saudi Arabia, which is the primary voice in the Muslim community in the Middle East because of the OPEC and everything else. And so the prince didn't sign off on joining the Abraham Accords unless the Palestinian region was handled differently. And so literally within not even 20 days, we've kind of gone from the Abraham Accords narrative to the Board of Peace. And you have to ask yourself a question. How does all this come about? Donald Trump has been proven to not be a spiritual man. He's not religious based upon all the tones and things he's stated. And the fact that he mentioned that he don't think he'll go to heaven because of whatever he said on the plane, go look up the quote if you don't believe me. It's like, this is the most religiously talking president that I've ever witnessed. And the problem I have with it is that he's mistaken in thinking that these world religions are compatible, and they're not. They couldn't be farther from different. And therefore, because of that, you'll never be able to get people who look at the beginning and the end of this entire experience we have called life differently and think that we can get along right now, because it's all about control. And so this Board of Peace situation, man, is spooky because it has a lot of biblical connotation to it of a person that's obsessed with peace, knowing not, but not having a spiritual foundation to center that peace on something truth and factual. And that's when we get into us being here in the Western Hemisphere, being more of a Judeo Christian, or the Bible being the primary focal point of, used to be in the schools. It's supposed to be the staple for our moral and ethical code as human beings. It's, I consider, the instruction manual for mankind given to us by Yahweh. And then you have Judaism, which is an earlier version of the Christian faith, minus Christ. Of course, they don't accept Christ. And then you have Islam, which in and of itself is a completely different and controversial set of ideas, given you have the infidel lingo and the idea of converting people by force if need be. So just all this stuff makes it very challenging. And of course, the Zionist sect of it, which is more like, nation state focused. They have the Goyim, which is that they can treat anybody that's not Jewish any way they want and use them as, for the most part, slaves in the debt structure and everything like that, usury and stuff like that. So all this stuff just doesn't add up. And the fact he's hard pressed on it, this is a part of his mission. And in my personal opinion, it doesn't even originate with him. These are not even his ideals. He's just a spokesman that gets up and reads the scripts. Watch when he talks on behalf of, or explain these ideas. He's reading from a teleprompter or a script, and he reads it verbatim. And it's not until he veers off script that you get a chance to see, I guess, what his thoughts are about what he's talking about. And you can tell when it's scripted, meaning it's provided for him by someone or something. And when he's sharing his own personal opinions and thoughts about things, he goes on rants where he says whatever. And it usually contradicts what he's previously said, i.e., just look at the most recent narrative surrounding the tariff dividends. Last week, he was confused and didn't think that he actually said that he was going to give out $2,000 checks. And then all of a sudden now he's back on cue saying that, yeah, if the Supreme Court doesn't shoot down the tariffs, I'll be able to give the dividends checks without Congress approving. So it's all these things that just make it just look real. It's just different, man. But then again, how is all this tied into gold and silver? Once again, uncertainty creates more, I guess, unease as well as volatility, because the dollar is what's being used in accomplishing all these agendas. The world's participating in this world peace agenda because of the U.S. position as global leaders and having the world reserve currencies. And all those nations are holding U.S. assets as reserves, i.e., our debt. And so literally, if you don't have players to play along with your game, you're going to find a reason and a way to intervene in their affairs, i.e., forcing them to come to the table to play by the games that you're constructing. And that's what's happening right now. And so as I look at more of this Board of Peace narrative, it's just all things that we should all be curious about, because how and why are they connecting all this together would be my question. And so I bookmark all types of things. But here's something that people may or may not find interesting. But once again, it's truth, I believe. Here's something that somebody shared. Don't even know him, but I just found this interesting. And I noticed he's done this for the second day in a row. But just check this out and just ask yourself, is this not accurate at this current moment? Today is January 2nd, 22nd, and there are still no Epstein arrests, no fraud arrests, no Russiagate arrests, no Clinton arrests, no COVID crimes arrests, no election interference arrests, no Biden laptop arrests, no answers on Thomas Crooks, not even familiar with that one, no bans on Congress trading, and no term limits. And the fact that he posted this yesterday and today, and it's gotten 4,400 views and 139 shares, is like, how did we get involved in all the things that we're involved in? And here's another one that I think is interesting. Let me share this with you. This is something I saw yesterday that I thought was somewhat comical, but yet somewhat true. Let me see. Did I bookmark it? I think I did. Give me a second here. This one is very, very interesting. Did I bookmark it? Yes, I did. Here. So here's another one that I think is funny, yet somewhat truthful, I guess. Here is a post that somebody made, also making fun of where we're at. And so this is a collection of images since the second term of Donald Trump, and just read it. And each image having something that fits into this political theater and this matrix of a experience we're having. And it's just things that just makes it made me laugh when I saw it. And then some people are like, what does that mean? Like, just each picture represents some narrative or some shift in what the MAGA crowd, I guess, wouldn't have known or thought or really wanted or really voted for. But something is some might have, but maybe not more, the majority. But it says, imagine living through the past 365 days and still not being even a little bit suspicious. And so, out of all these pictures here, from what you can see, what stands out to you the most? And so that's where each one has a different, I guess, storyline and then eventual cover up. But it's just, yeah. So for me, I'll show you the ones that stand out the most at first. You have the people coming out of the White House holding up these the FBI coming out holding up these documents, basically saying it's all here. And then a year later or so, almost redacted files to the point where you can't even read them. That's one. Then you have this Stargate, this AI US collaboration, which is not doing too well right now. Then you have the idea that this real ID is still being pushed majorly and fully operational. Then you have the fact that the Taliban head is now president of Syria, and he's invited to the White House and they're shaking hands and he's speaking very nice of him as if like he's been transformative. Then you have, the capturing of a actual president with his wife and him giving thumbs up. And then this one here, I haven't been able to figure this one out yet. So if anybody got any ideas, let me know what this one is, because I haven't figured that one out yet. But this is just some things that people are forced to tolerate because, yeah, everything else just doesn't make sense. But I just thought that was entertaining to say the least. But anyway, I got more storyline. Let's get to some other things here. Let me see. I bookmarked all types of things, and so with the increase in precious metals comes the concerns of fake gold and silver. So here's something that I saw that I think is worth bringing to your attention as well. And so here is a bar, $100 bar, apparently with lead poured into it. And then the warning is breaking. We're seeing a surge in fake silver bars circulating in the U.S. Says thousands of salted $100 silver bars entering the secondary market, and it's alarming. Considering silver recent surge, this isn't surprising. So think about this. If you have an uptick in crime when it comes to hollowing out bars, filling them in with tungsten or metal or whatever, and trying to move them along, it's obviously working. And they, whoever they are, you can associate it with, a variety of people. There's big bread to be made in this. So expect a lot more big bars and small coins to pop up. And I used to say that you'll be able to sniff something out based upon the price, because a scammer is always trying to move something at a discount or a deal, because who wouldn't pass up on a deal to get something cheaper than what it is the face value or market value? That's one sign. But given the uptick in demand, I believe that's yet to come, people will be willing to take silver at any price, even if it means fakes that are marked as regular spot price, because if you can get hold of something that you know will appreciate more than likely the next day, hence what I first start talking off about as we get closer to the actual equal price of East and West being somewhat similar, to where the price will move faster. And so therefore, if you see an ounce of whatever with the premium on top of it at, just say, $150 for that particular round, but yet it's right there in front of you, you're like, man, well, let me grab this now, because tomorrow it might be 160, 170, or whatever it might be. If it moves like that, to where it's going to be a lot easier to move smaller amounts of fake silver and gold, but more importantly, silver, because people will think that they're getting a deal by being able to actually get it in their hands at that moment. And that's going to be the thing that I believe really allows the silver fakes to continue to become popular, and they will move just as fast as the real. And therefore, it's going to be, just something to pay attention to. And it's going, and this is, far fetched, but it always happens. Greed and the idea of deception makes it so that there's going to be, mark my words, there's going to be a reputable dealer on the online or pawn shop, coin shop, something like that in your local neighborhood, that will, by accident or intentionally, acquire a larger amount of fake metals, bars, golds, coin, whatever. And because they are trustworthy, or have been, and or have a nice large clientele of steady buyers, they're going to start accepting fakes knowingly at some point, and then passing them to the buyers as if nothing ever happened. Because if we experience a situation where getting physical silver, even at the smallest denominations, is a problem, the fakes will definitely give the illusion of value to anybody, whether a buyer or a seller, and they'll be able to be passed along easy. And you'll never even know that you got a fake coin, fake bar, outside of doing your own testing, because you wouldn't think the test coming from the person you've been buying from a couple years, because it's always been good until it's not. So be on the lookout for that, because as supply continues to tighten, online dealers, especially if you don't have direct access to the refineries or to the source of metals, you're more than likely going to fall victim to having to question whether or not you're going to keep your doors open, go offline, or just it's time to, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years. I'm out the market. It's hard to source. It's becoming a headache to source because of this. Or you're going to let some fakes come through. You're going to have inventory, but you're going to just mingle it up together to where somebody come in to buy 10 ounces. You intentionally give them 2 or 3 fake ounces along with 7. They walk out. They can't prove that they got it from you directly, because you can always say, hey, that's not me. And then we're going to have FBI coming in. So think about this. We're going to have FBI coming in, all types of government agencies. It's going to be a breaking story, and that story is going to go viral. It's going to be on the mainstream news source. They're going to love to jump on this. Coin shop or online dealer that, labeled by the Better Business Bureau is caught selling this and this and that, whatever. And from that moment on, think about this. The government going to say, for your safety and protection, we need to now monitor and track and trace all dealers. If you sell gold, silver of any capacity, you must register. And and in registering, we need to know how much inventory, where you source it from, so we can protect the American people from fraudulent, fake, whatever, because the industry is taking on a whole new life of itself, and we need to protect the American people. So we need a list of everybody and their purchases and how much they purchase and the type that they purchase, with some type of serial ID number, so that we can verify that if that fake ounce came from your store or your dealer. See, that's how, from problem, reaction, solution, the government can get involved in every aspect of our lives, because it's all about protecting you, the user, or the person that receives the service. So once again, this is a hypothetical, but then again, if the mind can conceive it, then obviously somebody's out here doing it already. And so all it takes is a breaking national story, and then the entire gold silver industry from the retail space changes overnight. And that's possible. So just be on the lookout that as the price of things go up, the best way to divert people's attention is to distract them or give them something to substitute the idea of missing out on that, because this new thing is just more that's exciting, and voila. But anyway, this is just my opinion. I could be 100% wrong. You never know. But once again, yeah, I'm not. I haven't been too off. I haven't been too far off. But what do I think about selling physical to pay off a mortgage? That is a very good. That is a very good question, and everybody's situation is different. And so, I personally, just my thoughts. I look at physical, tangible wealth as something that is meant to be held on to for as long as possible and to be used as a capital buffer for after the reset, to where you'll have some physical, tangible liquidity, because gold and silver is money, will be served as the best form of money, will have a price in whatever fiat currency, whether it's digital or paper, that we are issued, to where that's your start over fund. Along the way, depending on your situation, do what you got to do. But this is just my opinion. But yet, my thought would be use what's being deliberately positioned as the next form of currency, and it's digital. But if you're not in the digital space, then don't worry about it. But I believe between today and 2030, the West wants crypto to succeed. And whether you like it or not doesn't matter. It's already proven. And what do I mean by that? I'll just I'll give you a little tease. Uh, Larry Fink made a statement yesterday, and he hinted at what is coming. So once again, you got to realize that these people, they already have a plan in place. And so let me just share this with you. So whether you want it or not, it doesn't matter. This is a global event. Your opinion or your participation is irrelevant, because you will participate whether you want to or not. If you want to be a part of society, you will participate more than likely. But it says why BlackRock's Larry Fink wants the entire financial system on one common blockchain. And so that's his vision. And as head of the World Economic Forum, which specializes in private public partnerships, every single institution that associates with this group here, they're all in sync on working on the same thing. So the banks have already won, because distributed ledger technology has become front and center through tokenization and stablecoins. Tokenization, stablecoins are one and the same, in the sense that they are what was initially planned for this great reset, well before we even came into all this revelation. And Bitcoin and all the other distributed decentralized tokens were all just cover for the advancements of this technology. So it's already going to work. The DTCC has used tokenization on their own private blockchain. The banks, through the Genius Act, now have access to the creation of stable coins. And then you have the tokenization of all real world assets, which are here. It's just not mainstream yet. So you're going to participate in it, because everything you own in a tangible form will end up being tokenized, with or without your permission. Because in order to have claim to it via deed or anything else, it will be on somebody's blockchain. So my whole point is, holding on to your physical as long as you can is what you might want to do. But then again, because we're going to see a crypto surge once the QE is officially cut on, because they want people to participate in that, giving up their tangible for the intangible, I would say participating in the crypto space will give you an opportunity to then pay off whatever you want and have access to it, have ownership of it. But once again, you never really own anything, because we're all just using it at the end of the day. But keep it physical, use the digital, was what my thought would be. And then as I hinted off for those that might have came late, uh, a statement that was made yesterday by the crypto czar in the White House. Let me share something with you, and it's the fact that it's not if, it's already happened. Trump's crypto czar, David Sachs, says banks will fully embrace crypto once market structure bill passes. So the bill they're referring to is this Clarity Act, which is centered around yield for stable coins, which ultimately the banks will be able to have access to it directly. And once it becomes a uniform standard, the banks will ultimately have last say in all of this because the banks will grow stronger. Because once people accept the idea that crypto and distributed ledger technology and cryptographic tokens were initially created at rebranding the legacy system, merging TradFi and DeFi together to create the digital system that they already had planned out, the banks will win. The banks always win. In this life, the banks are going to win because the banks are the heart and soul of the corrupt governments. And everybody that participates in the political sphere are forced to comply and do what the banks say. It always happens. So my whole point is metals serve a point to keep you attached to the tangible world. Hold on to it as long as you can for the sake of having a connection to the real world because everything is being steered digital. And all this stuff I'm talking about digital, it's already done. The banks won. Like, so don't think for 1 second that, they're gonna lose. This administration will make sure that doesn't happen. So this is just me, man. Hold this physical, spin the digital. 100%. LBP, words of a wise man there. Words of a wise man there. Okay, but anyway, yeah, just connecting. Let's just keep an eye on spot price, whether or not it continues to trend upward. My suspicion is that it will. And once it does, we'll enter a new phase of this crypto. I'm sorry, not crypto, but this metals price discovery that I referred to. And once the East and the West is at parity as far as the spot price, once they're in sync and the West cooperates with the East, then we know we're heading up to places we never could imagine. And then we'll find out how the government gets involved, on the home front, as I mentioned, for those that came in late, expect more fakes to pick up and then the government to step in to protect you from the fakes. And then in doing so, they want to know what you have, where it's at, and how they can better serve you. Anyway, just having some fun. Anyway, but that being the case, be blessed, be safe. We got other topics I want to touch on, so I can't put it all. I mixed too much in here. Sorry for that, but a thought triggers another thought, then another thought. But the most important things is silver, what the government's going to help you with when it comes to your silver and gold, and the fact that the bank's already won the crypto game. So that's just real. But anyway, if you guys enjoy this, please hit that thumbs up right now before you exit to show love to the algos. And then if there's anything of importance here that got you thinking, got your wheels churning, clip it out, share it on your socials or whatever. Tell your family and friends what's happening over here and invite them to come join us. I definitely would love to connect with more people to give them an alternative perspective and to help filter through the noise because there'll be a lot more noise coming and you need a sound viewpoint that's not biased, not left, not right, just straight up the middle, given to you straight, what I consider to be more truthful. And also, because of all this spiritual stuff happening now, you got to realize that, once you got a president that's hard pressed on world peace amongst all these incompatible religions, you got to know that, the Bible is holding on to some truth there, people. And so you also want to make sure you're getting information from someone that is able to acknowledge the spiritual essence of what's happening. Because if that person just focused on a dollar sign and what they can do for your pockets, but not mentioning the other side of the equation that, once again, is just a tool, you can't take it with you. And where you're going when you leave here, you might want to just, yeah, 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 just, yeah, whatever.